Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
You'll die alone. No one wants you here. My 17-year-old son, Ethan, looked straight at me when he said it. No hesitation, no guilt, not even a flicker of doubt in his voice. I was mid-chew, fork still in hand, the taste of underseasoned green beans going cold on my tongue. Across the table, my wife Laura didn't even look up from her plate. Not a flinch, not a word, not even that tight, disapproving glance she used to give him when he mouthed off. She just kept slicing her chicken like nothing happened. I swallowed, slowly, methodically. I wiped my mouth with the paper napkin Laura had folded like she always did, neat and triangular. I looked at Ethan, who was already scrolling through something on his phone, thumb flicking up like he'd already moved on. I glanced over at Jessica, our daughter, who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Thanks for dinner," I said. My voice didn't crack, and for some reason, that made me proud. "Food's good." Then I stood up, took my plate to the sink, rinsed it off, and left it in the drying rack. I walked out of the dining room, and I never sat at that table again. Now, before we get into what happened next, I should back it up a little, because dinners in our house hadn't always felt like this, like a funeral with food. There was a time, years ago, when dinner meant something. When I'd get home covered in drywall dust and sawdust, and Laura would hand me a beer while the kids chased each other around the living room. Jessica used to tell me about her school projects, and Ethan used to beg me to throw the football with him after we ate. Back then, family meant warmth. It meant something solid. But something shifted over the years. A lot of small nothings added up into one big something. Laura stopped waiting up for me. Ethan stopped talking to me altogether unless he needed money. Jessica moved out after her divorce and never really came back home except for birthdays or holidays. I retired 2 years ago thinking I'd enjoy peace and quiet, maybe do some home renovations, but instead I ended up feeling like a piece of furniture that nobody really wanted anymore. That morning had already been off. Ethan had stormed into the kitchen yelling about his car battery dying, blaming me for not getting it replaced. Laura didn't say a word then either. Just kept pouring her coffee, letting me take the heat. I ended up driving him to school in silence, and the whole ride he had his earbuds in. No thank you. No nothing. Later that afternoon, I mowed the lawn, mostly out of habit. I trimmed the hedges, watered the plants, fixed a loose shutter that had been rattling in the wind for days. I did all the things I used to take pride in, and not one of them made me feel good anymore. Laura was in the kitchen when I came back in. She didn't say hello. Didn't ask how the lawn looked. Just nodded toward the trash can, which was full. I took it out without a word. When I came back, she was already setting the table for dinner, just 3 plates now since Jessica was only stopping by to drop something off. Dinner was chicken breast, steamed green beans, and mashed potatoes. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing right either. Like most things in our house these days, just bland and functional. I asked Ethan about school. He shrugged. I asked Laura about her sister. She said, "Same as always." Then Ethan, with his voice full of casual venom, dropped the line. "You'll die alone. No one wants you here." It didn't come out like a scream or a tantrum. It came out like a fact. Something he believed, something he had thought about before. And I think that's what got me the most. He meant it. So, after I cleaned my plate and walked out of the room, I didn't go to my bedroom. I didn't go to the living room to sit in my recliner, the one nobody ever touched but me. I went to the basement. The basement was my space. Always had been. When we moved into this house back in the 90s, I built the shelves myself, lined the walls with tools and blueprints from jobs I'd worked on. It smelled like sawdust and old beer and memory. I walked over to the corner, moved aside a dusty box labeled Christmas lights, and knelt down. Behind it was a lockbox. Not for money, not for weapons. For plans. I opened it and took out a folder. On the front, in big black letters I'd scrawled over a year ago, it said, Plan D. Back then, I told myself it was just a worst-case backup idea. The D stood for disengage. I'd put the folder together during a particularly rough patch after another silent argument with Laura and a full week of Ethan ignoring me. I never really thought I'd open it again. But now, as I sat in the basement listening to the muffled sounds of dishes clanking upstairs, I realized I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just finished. The folder had everything. A list of what to sell, who to call, a contact at a real estate firm I'd met while helping a buddy flip a house. The cabin's deed upstate that Laura never knew about. Even a list of what I'd take with me when I left. It was all there, and I hadn't touched it in months. But nothing in that folder was hypothetical anymore. I ran my hand over the paper, feeling its weight. Then I closed the box, stood up, and flicked off the light. Upstairs, I could hear them laughing at something on TV. Ethan's voice. Laura's laugh. I walked past the staircase, through the garage, and into the night air. I didn't say goodnight. And I never sat at that table again. It's a strange thing, really, to live inside a place you helped build from the ground up and still feel like you're squatting in someone else's story. That's exactly what it felt like in the weeks after that dinner, the one where Ethan told me I'd die alone and Laura said nothing, not even a sigh. I didn't pack a bag that night or storm out in anger like I've seen people do in movies or those dramatic reality shows. I stayed. I woke up the next morning, brewed coffee in the same scratched-up pot I'd bought 2 decades earlier, and read the paper like nothing had changed on the outside. But something inside me had cracked open, and I wasn't sure yet whether it was letting something out or letting something in. The morning after the dinner, Laura didn't say a word when I came into the kitchen. She was scrolling on her phone, wearing that beige robe she's had for 10 years now, the one I bought her during a Black Friday sale back when we still thought it was fun to shop together. Ethan came in a few minutes later, shirt half-tucked and earbuds in, grabbed a granola bar, and left without looking at either of us. I watched him leave and didn't say anything, just like I hadn't said anything the night before, because it was easier that way. It was like all the conversations in this house had been boiled down to transactions, needs, and logistics. No one talked unless they wanted something. No one asked how I slept. No one asked if I was okay. I spent that afternoon mowing the lawn, even though it didn't really need it. I figured if I kept moving, I wouldn't start thinking, and if I didn't start thinking, I wouldn't have to feel anything. After the lawn, I tightened a few loose boards on the back porch, fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, cleaned out the gutters, checked the batteries in the smoke detectors. Did all the things a man does to feel useful, even when no one notices. And no one did. Laura didn't comment on the fixed faucet. She used it without hesitation, like it had never dripped in the first place. Ethan came home, slammed the door, asked if I'd seen his black hoodie, and when I said no, he grunted and walked off. Jessica stopped by that evening, dropped off a package from her office, something Laura had asked her to pick up, and barely stayed 5 minutes. She looked tired, distracted, and when she hugged me goodbye, it felt like a courtesy. Her eyes didn't linger like they used to. I stood in the hallway after she left, staring at the closed front door and realized I'd become the ghost in my own home. Not in a dramatic, wailing through the walls kind of way. More like, I was still technically here, still breathing the same air, still moving through the same rooms, but no one really saw me. Not the real me. Just the version of me they expected, quiet, reliable, out of the way. That night, I pulled out an old photo album from the hall closet, one that had been gathering dust for God knows how long. I sat at the kitchen table with a bourbon and flipped through pages of smiling faces, birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, camping trips. There was one picture from the day we bought the house, me standing on the front lawn with Laura next to me, Ethan just a baby in her arms, Jessica grinning with a missing tooth. The grass was brown, the shutters were a faded green, and I was wearing a shirt 2 sizes too big. I remember feeling like a king that day. I built this place with my hands. I installed the tile in the kitchen. I laid the stone for the fireplace. I was proud of every nail and screw and piece of drywall. I built this house 26 years ago, I muttered aloud, sipping my drink. Then I paused. Wait, no. Ethan's 17. We bought it before he was born. That makes it 32 years. Damn. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because somehow even my memory had started slipping through the cracks like everything else. 32 years of life inside these walls, and here I was, reduced to miscounting them like a senile old man. The next morning, I sat out on the front porch with my second cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Crandall was walking her yappy little dog again. The Hendersons were hauling bags of mulch out of their trunk like every weekend was a new landscaping project. It all looked the same, and yet I felt completely apart from it. Like I was already gone and just hadn't told myself yet. Then a black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of our house. The man who stepped out looked like every real estate agent I'd ever met, clean-shaven, pressed shirt, shiny shoes not meant for actual walking. He carried a folder in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other. I didn't even stand up. He walked up the steps and extended his hand with a smile that was too white to be real. "Mr. Miller?" he asked. "The papers are ready. Once you sign, it's done." I looked at the folder. Then at my house. My house. And I said nothing. There's a quiet kind of freedom in detachment, not the kind that makes you feel lighter and liberated like in the movies, but more like that moment after you've held something too tight for too long and finally open your hand, only to realize the imprint it left behind might never go away. That's what it felt like for me in the days after the real estate agent came by, when I started moving from emotional detachment into physical preparation. I wasn't rushing it, wasn't angry or dramatic about it. I just started to let things go, piece by piece, like a man slowly cutting himself out of a net that had long since stopped serving any good purpose. The garage was the first to go. It was a mess of memories and rusted metal, half-used paint cans and unopened Christmas lights, garden tools that hadn't seen soil in 5 years. I spent an entire Saturday in there alone, not because anyone asked where I was or offered to help, but because I'd gotten used to being alone even when surrounded by people who were supposed to love me. I made 3 piles: keep, donate, trash. The keep pile was laughably small, an old hammer my father gave me, a few photos tucked in a cracked toolbox, my old army duffel from back when I still believed in loyalty. I posted half my tools on a local community board, priced cheap enough to move fast. By Sunday evening, a father and son picked up the whole lot in a beat-up Dodge truck. The boy looked about 12, and I told him how to clean the rust off the wrench heads before they went bad. He nodded like he actually cared, and for a second, it felt like something mattered again. Inside the house, I started canceling utilities one by one. The cable was easy. No one but Ethan used it, and even then, it was just for his gaming. The landline we hadn't touched in months. Water and electric I left running for now. I didn't want to spook them. Not yet. Jessica dropped by that Tuesday. She showed up without warning, holding a bag of groceries and that suspicious smile daughters wear when they know something's not quite right, but they're not ready to say it out loud. We sat on the porch with 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee, watching the sky turn that dusty orange color that makes the whole world feel like it's paused between what was and what might be. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, and it was the first time in weeks someone had asked me that without needing something in return. I gave a shrug that was meant to be casual, but I think it came off tired instead. "I'm fine. Just cleaning up. Downsizing." She sipped her coffee, then looked back at the house. "It feels emptier," she said. "Even before you started clearing stuff out. The energy's weird." I wanted to tell her everything right then and there, about the folder, the cabin, the account I'd opened in another state, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way her eyes looked sad, even when she smiled. Maybe it was the fact that she still came around when the others didn't. Or maybe I just wanted to enjoy one last moment with someone who used to see me as more than an ATM with a grill. "I'm not happy, Jess," I said finally, and it came out softer than I expected. "But I'm trying to figure it out." She reached over, squeezed my hand, and nodded. That was it. No advice, no lecture. Just that quiet understanding only daughters and dogs seem to master. The next morning, I made breakfast like I used to do on Sundays: eggs, toast, coffee, but something in the toaster must have finally given up because it spit out 2 slices so blackened they looked like burnt poker chips. I held one up, laughed out loud to no one in particular, and said, "Well, guess even the damn toasters had enough of me." The sound of my own laughter in the empty kitchen hit me harder than I thought it would. It wasn't sad laughter. It wasn't joyful either. It just was. That same morning, I boxed up the contents of the bookshelf in the den, my favorite novels, old instruction manuals, a few photo frames no one had looked at in years. I left the boxes in the back of the closet. Out of sight, but not forgotten. The bed felt colder now, not because Laura wasn't in it. Hell, she hadn't really been in it in any meaningful way in years, but because the weight of indecision had finally lifted, and the silence left behind felt louder. I started sleeping with the window cracked, even though it was still chilly at night. Something about the breeze reminded me I was still alive. That afternoon, while I was moving boxes from the garage to the attic, Laura walked into the kitchen and stopped dead in her tracks. The recliner was gone. The recliner, my chair, the one I'd had since before Ethan was born, the one I watched the news in every night, the one no one else dared to sit in. She looked around like she'd just realized something vital had disappeared. "Where's the recliner?" she asked, her voice sharper than usual. I didn't stop moving the box in my hands. I didn't even look up. "Storage," I said. And that was the first time she really looked at me in weeks. The day Ben came over started like most days had lately, quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful but instead feels like the space left after a door slams shut. I sat on the back deck with a coffee that had gone cold long before I remembered to drink it, staring out at the same backyard I'd mowed religiously for 32 years, and for the first time, I realized I no longer cared whether the grass was even or the hedges were trimmed. I could have let the whole thing grow wild, and no one inside would have noticed unless the Wi-Fi went out. Ben called around 11, said he was in town for a job interview. He does security consulting now, retired after 20 years in the Army, same as me. We'd been stationed together back in the early 90s, both younger, dumber, and full of the kind of optimism that only men who've never really been tested tend to carry around like a badge. He said he had a six-pack and a story to tell, and I figured why not let one of the few people left who actually gave a damn come over. He pulled up in a beat-up black Silverado, same truck he'd been rebuilding since 2009, and stepped out like he owned the place. That was always Ben. He never asked for permission, just showed up, confident, direct, unapologetically alive in a way I'd forgotten people could be. We sat on the porch, popped a couple of beers, and talked about things that didn't matter for a while: bad knees, politics, the price of tires, the weather. He asked about Laura, and I just said, "We don't talk much." He didn't push. He never did. But somewhere around beer number 3, things got real in that way only conversations between old friends can get when the sun's low and the air's thick with unspoken things. "You ever think about just disappearing?" I asked, not even sure why I said it out loud. Ben didn't laugh. Didn't joke. Just looked out across the yard and said, "Hell, man. All the damn time." I told him about how things felt in the house, how the walls seemed to close in a little more each day, how Laura didn't look at me anymore and Ethan only spoke when he wanted something, and Jessica, God bless her, tried. But even she was walking a tightrope between being their daughter and being mine. Ben nodded, swigged his beer, and leaned forward. "You don't gotta win, Dave," he said, voice low, serious. "You just gotta stop bleeding." That line stuck in my chest like a nail. I didn't know if he meant it as advice or a warning, or maybe a little of both, but either way, it felt like something cracked open inside me right then and there. Not a break. More like a release. He left around 7, slapped me on the back, and told me to call if I ever needed to vanish in the literal sense. He was only half joking. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed beside Laura, who was facing away from me, same as always. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about the years, the dinners, the arguments, the silence, the space between us that had grown so wide I couldn't even remember what we used to talk about. At 4 in the morning, I got up without a sound, dressed in the dark, and packed one bag, 2 shirts, a change of pants, my passport, my journal, a photo of Jessica when she was 7, and my father's old pocket knife. I took off my wedding ring and set it on the nightstand next to a half-used bottle of sleeping pills Laura had never mentioned. I stared at that ring for a long time, thinking about how something so small could once have meant everything and now felt like a relic from a different life. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel relief. I just felt done. The drive to the cabin was long, but I welcomed it. 3 towns over, up near a lake where the air was cooler and the cell signal was spotty. I'd bought the place 6 years ago with money from a side project, never told Laura, never brought anyone there. It had started as an escape hatch, something I told myself was just in case, but now it was more than that. It was mine. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell of pine and old books hit me in the face like a memory of a life I could have had if I'd made different choices. The place was stocked: food, water, backup generator, firewood. I lit a fire even though I didn't need the heat, just wanted the sound. Around midday, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the realtor. "It's official. House is sold. Funds are in your account." I stared at it for a minute, then turned my phone face down on the table, walked outside with a cigar I'd been saving for the right occasion, and lit it while watching the lake shimmer in the sunlight. For the first time in what felt like decades, I breathed. Not shallow, not forced, but deep, honest air. Then the phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. I listened to it twice, because the first time I thought I'd misheard her. Jessica's voice came through, hurried, tense. "Dad, something's going on. Ethan's freaking out. Mom is crying. Did you do something?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the lake, cigar burning down in my hand, thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or messy. It's disappearing so quietly they don't even realize you're gone until everything feels colder without you. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as I turned slowly onto my old street, the one where I'd taught Jessica to ride a bike, the one where Ethan had chased ice cream trucks and scraped his knees on sidewalks now covered with fallen leaves and neighborhood gossip. I hadn't planned to come back, not really, but some part of me needed to see it all one last time, to witness the aftermath, not to gloat or to explain, but to understand if I had made the right kind of noise by finally going quiet. I parked 2 houses down, out of habit more than anything, where the branches of the big maple tree hung low enough to shadow the windshield. The truck idled for a moment before I killed the engine and leaned back, letting the seat creak beneath my weight like it was sighing right alongside me. From where I sat, I could see the front of the house, our house, though calling it ours didn't feel right anymore. It looked the same, but different in that strange way things do when you know you don't belong to them anymore. The siding still needed a pressure wash. The porch light was still too bright. But something in the air around it had shifted. And then I saw them. Jessica was standing on the front steps, arms crossed, talking fast and firm like she used to when Ethan and Laura got into it over grades or curfews. Laura was pacing inside the doorway, her voice sharp, carrying just far enough for me to make out tones if not words. Ethan, for once, wasn't glued to his phone. He was pacing the yard like a dog left out in a storm, gesturing wildly with both hands, eyes darting back toward the house as if the walls might start falling in around him. I didn't go in. I didn't knock on the door or call out or wait to be noticed. I just watched. They were exactly what I expected: confused, panicked, loud. Not because they missed me, not exactly, but because the foundation had shifted, and I'd always been the one holding it steady, even as they chipped away at me year after year. And now that I was gone, really gone, it wasn't silence they'd inherited, it was the echo of what they never said. I could tell by the motion in the living room that the recliner was gone. That ugly, reliable thing I had refused to get rid of no matter how many times Laura complained about its bulk or how it clashed with her color schemes. It wasn't just a chair to me, it was the only seat in the house that ever felt like mine. I could also tell from the bare front window that the photo wall I built, frames filled with birthdays, camping trips, school plays, and ordinary Sundays, had been stripped. Probably taken down in the frenzy of realizing I'd taken more than just my clothes when I walked out that morning. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd only claimed the pieces of myself they left lying around, untouched and unnoticed. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Jessica again. I didn't open the message right away. I watched her instead, still trying to explain something to her mother, who now sat on the bottom step of the porch, head in her hands like the weight of my absence had finally settled into her bones. Ethan kicked a garden stone across the lawn. He looked younger suddenly, like the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. For a second, I felt something sharp twist in my chest, but it wasn't regret. It was recognition. That boy was gone, and I wasn't responsible for what had taken his place. I picked up my phone and typed slowly, deliberately. I'm okay. I just wanted peace. You'll understand someday. I sent it and didn't expect a reply. But within seconds, it buzzed again. They're calling you selfish. I told them to look in the mirror. I didn't smile, but something inside me eased. Just a little. Maybe enough. I stayed for another minute or two, then started the engine again. The street looked longer now, and I could see the last of the autumn sun spilling gold through the trees like something from a painting we used to hang in the hallway. I took one last look at the house, not searching for anything, just acknowledging what I was leaving behind. Maybe I will die alone. Maybe somewhere down the road I'll miss a birthday or a wedding or the way Laura's laugh used to fill the kitchen on Sunday mornings. Maybe I'll remember something small, a smell, a sound, the way Ethan's face lit up when I taught him how to use a power drill, and feel the pang of what ifs pressing against my chest. But it won't be guilt. It won't be shame. And it damn sure won't be weakness. Because if they ever wonder why I left, if they sit around that table again and puzzle over where it all went wrong, they won't have to look far. All they have to do is remember that dinner. The chair I sat in. The plate I finished. The words they didn't take back. The silence they wrapped around me like a noose made of indifference. I didn't leave because I wanted revenge. I left because I finally understood that I could. I didn't leave the house. I left the silence.